All right, well, thank you for attending what I guess is the first session that you'll attend today. The 10:30 sessions are early, so I want to try to make this light and interactive if possible. So everybody, as you're, getting through your coffee, etc., hopefully this is entertaining and a little bit more lighthearted than some of the heavier sessions you'll have a little bit later on, right? But today we're going to talk about Serverland. Stay frozen or let it go. So should you move to the cloud? Should you not move to the cloud? And what are the discussions around that, right? So my name is Steve Carlson. I am a principal cloud engineer for Verizon, and my job is basically to take product requests from customers and move those up into product and represent those into development into our cloud products. So I'm a subject matter expert on cloud for government, and that's why I'm doing the presentation here. And I will let the other panel members introduce themselves.
Okay, I'm Tim Carter. I'm Vice President of Sales for Verizon Enterprise Services, primarily responsible for the public sector. So I cover both federal and state and local agencies as well as K-12 and higher ed. And look forward to having a conversation with you today about cloud.
Davood, Ghods, Chief of Office of Technology Services within the Department of Technology. Glad to be here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for participating on the panel. So why are we here, right? Well, there's a couple reasons why we're here. For one, old school IT practices continue to weigh us down, right? So we're still treating a lot of our IT workloads that we're currently working on in the same way that we've always treated them before. We're still thinking about them in terms of boxes and power and cooling and everything else that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But we need a way out of that, right? That situation isn't getting better for a lot of us, and we need to improve on that and think outside the box on how we can provide some services to our customers, so we need a way out. One of my main points I want to bring up in this presentation is that cloud is not a substitute, and I think there's a lot of misconception that I want to take an existing infrastructure that I have and move it somewhere else, and cloud is just a substitute for doing it on my own. And I think cloud, if you look at it from that standpoint, that's not enough of a reason for you to move to cloud. It shouldn't be just a substitute, right? Your servers, they don't hug you back, right? I know a lot of people like to hug their servers, but they don't hug you back. In fact, I would tell you in my 20 years in IT, I would tell you I think servers actually hate you. Based on what they've done to me anyway, I think they hate me. So, servers, they may not love you as much as you love them. And I think what everybody else is also looking for is a real use case of cloud and a real example of how cloud is not just a substitute of infrastructure. So I hope to show you that a little bit later in the presentation. But I love my servers, right? And what you've said has just made me sad. So I'm sorry for that if I made you sad. I like servers too, and I'm a techno geek, but there's no reason to be sad. So letting go of your servers means moving forward with what the best the cloud can offer you in terms of services and how you can take them and work with them in incredible ways, right? Because right now, I think what most IT organizations are used to is they're used to working inside the finite, right? So you've got finite resources, you've got finite servers, you've got finite space, and you've frankly got finite time. So we need to kind of break out of the finite and move beyond that. So going back to my point earlier, cloud is not a substitute. It should never just be a replacement for existing infrastructure. It should always provide you some level of improvement over the scenario that you're doing, right? So that can be a lot of different things that it improves on. It should be an improvement in availability or redundancy or disaster recovery, right? It should be an improvement. It should provide you an improvement in performance or scalability. It should provide you an improvement in management or the responsibility model, right? So you should be able to shift accountability for your workload to the cloud and the group that runs that cloud if that's something that you wish to do in your organization, right? And it should improve your total cost of ownership. So let's try to get away from the comparison of just primitives. And when I say primitives, I'm talking about CPUs, gigabytes, and gigahertz, and gigabytes of storage, right? That's what I call primitive in this model. So it's really, really difficult to compare the benefits of cloud when you're focusing on the primitives and trying to compare those primitive costs across the costs that you have on your own primitives, right? And it's difficult because for a lot of reasons. Even in cloud, and I know we like to say cloud is all the same, but everybody's cloud offering has different pricing on those primitives and includes or doesn't include certain things in that pricing. So it's like comparing an apple to a pineapple. They both have apple in them, but they're totally different things, right? And then let's not forget what really matters when we're talking about cloud, because I think I can assume everybody here is, either an administrator or a government agency or represents the public sector in one shape or another, right? So let's not forget what really matters. What matters to us is compliance and security and governance, license compliant, performance and transparency, right? Those are all things that we have to have from a cloud vendor. And unfortunately, a lot of cloud vendors that are out there can't really give us those things that we require for our workloads. So let's be realistic and look at services that we can actually use and not services that just look attractive based on the primitive pricing. Okay. So I wanted to give you guys a static example, a good example of taking cloud out of the just a replacement for infrastructure model. And a good example of that is one of our customers, Texas Water Development Board, and they represent an organization called the Texas Natural Resources Information Systems Group. And they essentially run the information systems for all of resource development in the state of Texas. They had a huge problem. The problem was that they had a huge need for geographic information systems, and I think the state of California has a lot of need for that as well. And they used geographic information systems for the analysis and planning for most of their resources across the state. But there were a ton of problems with their implementation of GIS. One was that the infrastructure that they had was outgrowing their facility. Two, they needed a central deployment of GIS because every sub-agency in the state had their own individual deployment of GIS, and they did a calculation on what that was costing them from a licensing standpoint, and it was atrocious. And not only that, they had really a lot of difficulty in exchanging data between those GIS systems because some groups were going open source, and some groups were going vendor supported, and file formats and data files weren't transferring between them. So they needed a central deployment where everybody could access the same type of GIS system and exchange the same types of files, right? Again, they needed universal access, so they couldn't house this in one agency or another's location because everybody wanted the same type of performance and access from the system in order to participate in it. So everybody wanted equal participation in it. And they needed solid SLAs and usage-based billing. So when they looked at all those requirements and they looked at what they could provide on their own, there were quite a few things that they couldn't do. And so their solution was to move to the cloud. So they moved the GIS system into our cloud. It was built specifically for their GIS purpose, and that's the storage was performing and everything that went along with the requirements for the GIS vendor went in there. It was a centralized location where everybody could access the system through the same common portal, so we developed a portal that was the front end of it. We connected into the existing networking systems with real networking, so not software-defined networking or anything else. We were able to intimately connect the state's global network with Verizon's network, and we provided them, security around all that stuff. We had instantaneously, they had an SLA and accountability for that GIS system, and it was because of the centralization of the system and the common file systems that now were presented in the central system. They had an easy way to integrate with all the other systems, and it has been a huge hit. It's actually a model that a lot of other states are looking at this point because they're adopting the same kind of needs for geographic information systems, and a central deployment for all agencies tends to make a lot of sense. Right? So you can see, based on the points that I brought up earlier, that there has to be a tremendous list of benefits that goes into you moving to the cloud. The business case has to be there in order for you to do it. So cloud is good. Cloud is good. Verizon Cloud is good. Moving to the cloud, if it can get you that benefit, is good. So the next part of our presentation that I'm going to go through is a panel Q&A. And the way that I wanted to organize this was that I always have the same types of questions come to me from agency CIOs and administrators. And I've always kind of collected those questions and kept track of them. And what I want to do is I want to present those questions to our panel members, which are the same ones that I'm sure that your own staff or your own experience, you come across these same questions around the cloud. And I want to see what their answers are, and then I'll also jump in at that time as well, right?
And
So,
if the audience has any
yeah,
questions.
and if the audience has, we're definitely, as we go through these things, if the audience has any questions about the questions that I'm asking, please feel free to jump in, and then I'll also open it up at the end for anybody else that has any questions that they'd like to ask themselves and get the feedback from the experts that are on there, right? So the first objection that I hear a lot of, and it's probably the most common one that I have, and we work with large agencies and small agencies alike. The first question I always get is, well, my application team says that their application won't work in the cloud. So how do you answer that, right? So I'm going to go to Tim first. So how I know you get that question a lot. How do you answer that question?
So in theory, we get that a lot, and what happens is we go in and we evaluate the customer's application or applications for the cloud. Typically, most cases, the solution we always come up with is what we call a hybrid deployment. That means not everything will run in the cloud, but what we end up doing is do a hybrid deployment with a fixed infrastructure for the applications that their performance would not be enhanced by moving to the cloud. But for almost all applications, most of them can be configured to run in the cloud, and those that are not are put in a hybrid deployment suite. So it's very much in close proximity, so when you're accessing the system, it determines whether it goes over to the fixed infrastructure or the cloud. Seamless from a working perspective, and you will find that almost 90% of our deployments from a large perspective are all hybrid. So absolutely, almost all applications will work in the cloud, and for those who don't, we have custom plans where we deploy to take care of that issue.
Davood, do you want to?
I would add to that, typically, when that question comes up for us, we say, let's do some type of a suitability assessment to see if that application is really dedicated for a physical server, that it really won't work in a virtualized environment. Maybe you're right. Maybe it won't work. But you will continue running that on a physical server. You will have to support that physical server. That physical server will draw up power, cooling, everything in your infrastructure. Whereas if you bring it and convert it into a virtualized environment, then it would be a candidate for cloud. But we typically say, let's confirm. Let's go and assess and see if that application is actually ready for cloud or not. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But those that aren't are going to eventually be converted because it makes business sense to move them.
Yeah, and I'll add from my own personal experience, I get this question a ton, and my answer always is, it goes back to one of the points I brought up earlier in the presentation, is that cloud is not a replacement for your existing infrastructure, right? So you can't actually take your cloud, your workload, as you have it physically defined, and actually move it to the cloud and expect that it works exactly the same way, right? So you have to kind of break away from that instance and say, okay, here's the end goal and end result of the application. And as long as we can achieve that end result and end goal of that application, that's what we should really be focusing on. So I can give you a really, really good example. So we work with being Verizon, we work with some of the largest cell phone manufacturers. And I don't know if you notice on your cell phones now, everybody has some sort of storage or cloud storage or some cloud service that's offered on your phones in one way or another, right? We had one of the most popular cell phone vendors have a cloud storage service offering that they were offering as a native functionality of their phone, and they needed to bring that into the cloud because their existing infrastructure wasn't able to handle it. And so they brought to us this extremely complex architecture with caching layers and several different database layers and all these things that they had to do to actually design the infrastructure to work in their own data center. And when we brought it into the cloud, there were a few things that instantaneously we didn't need to do, right? They had an entire caching layer for their databases in order to get the storage to perform quickly, but since we were landing them on a cloud that's based on solid state disk, there was no need for that caching layer anymore. So we immediately removed about 45 servers in the architecture based on the ability to prove to them that it was performing well enough without that layer of caching involved, right? They also brought the block sizes of their storage into the cloud. And so what we said is, look, we don't think the block sizes are optimized properly for our infrastructure versus your infrastructure. So we optimized the block sizes for performance on the storage and basically doubled the performance of their existing infrastructure with 30% fewer servers with the elimination of the caching layer. So in the end, what happened was not only did we move them to the cloud, but that infrastructure ran better than it ever had run before inside the cloud, but it was just different. It was a different architecture than what had come in. And you have to look at, you're going to hear the term workload a lot, concentrate on workload. And I think that's, as service organizations, what we really like to see in cloud is bring us the workload and the requirements of the workload, and let's all work together to try to figure out how that works well inside the cloud. Right. So, second question, and I get this a lot too, and it's very popular in government, is that I think I need a private cloud, but clouds that are private are too expensive and they don't scale. So, what are my options? And I get that objection a lot. So I'm going to go to Davood first, right? So how do you feel about that particular objection that private clouds are too expensive and don't scale?
You want to go from Sacramento to San Francisco. You have an option of renting your own private automobile, or you have the option of getting on public transit. Which one is cheaper? And which one gives you more flexibility and security? If you get on public transit, is there a chance that you might get some type of a bug from someone who's sitting next to you or somewhere in the bus? So that's how I would like to start my response,
Right.
and let you know that private cloud does cost more. In our case, CalCloud is a private cloud. It's a community private cloud for the state of California. It's not a public cloud. It does not run on the internet alone. If internet goes down, CalCloud will still stay up because it runs on state's private wide area network. California Government Enterprise Network procedure. So those are the reasons that private cloud could be more expensive. But also, as Steve mentioned earlier in this session, the bundling could be different. When you compare apple to apple, that's when you know what the costs really are. When you get your first or second bill from the cloud provider, that's when you really know what your costs really are. So a private cloud is going to cost more. It's going to have to be compared with another private cloud in order to say which is expensive or which is not expensive. So if we could get the public cloud providers have a private wide area network also dedicated to their private cloud, that would be the time that we could compare apples to apples. I can add to that later if there are
absolutely. We've got other questions that are kind of complementary to that too, so thank you. Jeff, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, the only thing I would add in is our largest cloud customers are all deployed in the private cloud environment because of their, and then what we look at from a private cloud perspective is once you hit a certain level of mass, it's absolutely more, it can actually be more affordable, but you have to hit that certain inertia first for that to happen. But again, our two largest cloud customers are both housed in their own environments, in their own cages, running on the same platform that my public private cloud runs on, or my eCloud Federal Edition runs on, but it's their dedicated instance of cloud. So when we look at your requirements, depending on what you want, I mean, it's a custom solution for us. So when you walk in and you're, especially in the public sector, because as Davood said, what drives the cost of our cloud is compliance. We're FedRAMP. So you're going to get all these certification security built into the product that you're not going to find on the public cloud. But and as Davood actually pointed out, not just from a bug, but let's say we can guarantee you're going to get there at a certain time. We can also guarantee that you're not going to get mugged on the way. So from a security perspective, it's extremely important to understand what your requirements of your business are, what you're trying to accomplish. But there's no question in my mind that in a lot of instances, private cloud, dedicated private cloud is actually economical.
From my personal experience, and I think there's a lot of data out there, you can even Google this topic, it's a really popular topic on the internet, as far as when private cloud doesn't make sense or is public cloud really the answer. You can get a lot of data on this. I typically see with my customers that that inflection point that Tim talked about is actually comes a lot sooner than other people think. That inflection point comes at around $10,000 a month in billing, is when both the private cloud cost and the public cloud cost kind of intersects, right? And a lot of that stems from one of the really good points that Davood brought up, is that there's a lot of auxiliary costs in cloud, different vendor offerings, right? So it's very difficult to see what the total cost is in the collection of the cloud offering until you see, your first or second bill. It's typically about 25% higher than anybody ever expects, and that's based on data transfer rates, et cetera. But that inflection point comes pretty quick at $10,000, and when you move past the $10,000 a month state, then you really are, when you weigh security and private connectivity and everything else like that, it's kind of a tough argument to say that public cloud is cheaper than private cloud at that point. So, and we've demonstrated that over and over again, and we're more than happy to demonstrate it over and over again. Right? Good.
Kind of questions for Davood. As departments move into Cal Cloud or into public cloud that Verizon would have, I can see how you could deploy services quicker. But are you finding that the existing IT staff is able to provide better value to whomever their constituents are, since they're not focused on building things and hugging those servers, as you said? Have you seen a change in that?
That's definitely one of the benefits of not worrying about the infrastructure. If departments are having staff and resources, building infrastructure, maintaining infrastructure, and if they give that role to a cloud provider, then they can take care of their internal business needs better with additional resources because they are close to the business. And that's really what they should be focusing on. Infrastructure today has pretty much become a utility. There is no need for every department to repeat having the same functionality, whereas it can be centralized under a cloud provider. One other thing that I was going to add about private cloud and cost and all of that is not everything needs to be in a private cloud. We realize that. If you have a, let's say, marketing website for your organization, even if it's a hospital, that doesn't necessarily have to be on a private cloud because of the additional security private cloud provides. Those kind of things, of course, you don't have to worry about security as much. But if you have personal information, HIPAA data, or data that needs to be HIPAA compliant, or you have sensitive information, it was a requirement from our own customer that we want that data to be at a state facility on a private cloud, and we wanted to know at all times what the location of those data centers were. So that's why Cal Cloud exists in our facilities in Rancho Cordova and Vacuum.
And I would agree. I would say that one of the number one requests that we get from our customers is transparency, is the difference, right? Transparency is really the most important thing for agencies to evaluate when they're looking at cloud vendors, and that means a lot. I know that word kind of gets glossed over a little bit when you throw it out, but what am I running on? who's touching what I'm running on, what's their governance around what I'm running on, right? And then how everything down to how the organization operates and where they're supporting it from are all important for sensitive data workloads, right? And if you don't have that kind of transparency and you can't ask your provider for that data, then not only do you not feel good about not being able to have that data, but do you really ever really know, what's going on with your workload? And so I think it's really, really important that you have that kind of transparency. And I think, fortunately or unfortunately, private clouds are often where that has to happen.
And remember, we run into the reason why most people move to the cloud, and a lot of times it costs us not even the top 5 reasons. It's for the ease of deployment. I can literally go in, put an order through our portal system, and in 30 minutes or less, I've turned up additional resources. I can go in and put the same counterman and pull those resources back. As Davood said, it's become such a commodity, it's almost a utility. It's like turning up the air conditioning or turning it down. I have the ability at a moment's notice to adjust my demand or usage on the product, which is huge for folks in the public sector trying to manage their budgets. So you literally have complete control. Plus, if you think about the purchasing cycle to buy physical assets, get them through the system, then go out and deploy them. It can take a long time, and if you see an increase in demand from the citizens about a particular project, in the cloud, that's not even an issue anymore. You just turn it on, and if it's a short-term burst, you turn it back down. That's one of the #1 reasons why people move to the cloud.
Thank you both. So I'm going to jump on one of the comments that you had a little bit earlier, right? And I get this objection quite often as well, and that is, I'm really concerned about security. I don't want to connect to a cloud over the internet, right? So I get that a lot. Even if it's with VPN, I still have, some issue with it being VPN and its availability and its overhead and everything else. So I'm not going to go to cloud because I can't connect to it in a real way. And I get that objection a lot. I know, Davood, you brought that up about how we have, that Cloud has private connectivity, et cetera. Kim,
Absolutely. So if you look at most of our customers, they're all connected through private lines. So they have their own dedicated connection points. They do not access through the internet. The only time that most of these, especially on the federal side, is when they have a public-facing website that they allow folks and they want their ease of access. But for the most part, they're all running on dedicated networks today. So that's kind of a myth that people are actually going through the public internet. That's not the case at all.
Yeah, the other part of it too is that budget-wise and procurement-wise, you need fixed costs. That's on certain aspects, right? And I think running stuff over the internet in a purely usage fluctuating model is very, very difficult to predict. What it is you're going to be spending on a month-to-month basis, and it's almost impossible, right? So you really, really need to have the ability to directly and intimately connect with your cloud vendor and have that fixed cost, have that security that you can wrap around it. And I think that's, I don't know of any other customer that we have that hasn't moved to private connectivity either. I also wanted to add that I think you could do some things over private connectivity that you can't do over the public internet. There's a lot of services that we can optimize over private links for performance, and I think that requires private dedicated links in order to do that. And then other things that we could do as far as, I don't know how familiar a lot of people are with moving data in and out of the cloud on the public cloud platforms, but you get charged for moving data in and out of cloud platforms in most cases, right? When you have private connectivity, you're not charged for that movement of data across those links. And so that could be as much as a 30 to 40% savings on actually moving your data. If you've got an application that actually trades in data, it really can save you money by having private. The private costs are largely offset by the fact that you can move your data around at will and access it without having those additional charges, right? So that's one of the advantages. Now the last question that I have, and then we'll open up the floor to questions is, I get this a lot. I need a business case to move from internally built to the cloud. How do I develop a business case for doing that? Because I've got to show, some sort of benefit to, so and I think it goes back to, you know, everything else that we've been talking about. I get that question a lot. So Tim, I mean, what do you say to people that say, I need a business case?
It's actually very simple for us to go in with our pre-sales engineering staff and create that case for you. We have calculators, so you can go in and figure out exactly what you're running in your fixed infrastructure today. It's a very quick exercise to go ahead and do an estimate of what that would cost to move to the cloud. And oftentimes, the one interesting thing that Davood said that still resonates is that a lot of people don't know their true cost of ownership. They don't factor in everything that goes into what they're spending on a daily basis to maintain their infrastructure, whether it be power, cooling, shared resources, human capital. So anytime we run the analysis, we've never come back with a did not reduce overall cost by a significant amount.
What I would add to that is that the business case is what we have been talking about, the agility that it will provide you. The fact that you don't have to guess at what your budget is going to be, but you can budget much easier. An example that I'll just walk you through within our environment in government, let's say I want to just a simple test and development environment. Let's say I want to put something like that together, and it's not a huge application, it's not a huge system, 5 servers. I put in the paperwork, I go through the procurement, I receive the hardware, and assuming that all of this is going well, and by now, 3 months has passed, 3 months. Now I get the equipment, I have to configure it. Then the firewall group has to set the firewall rules, goes back to network for them to configure it. Another 2 weeks gets added. All of that is skipped in a cloud environment because all of that is already provided for you. And it gets provisioned in 25 minutes, in our case, for Cloud. Why wouldn't a CIO, why wouldn't a department want to take advantage of that agility? So that's the business case. I think it's pretty compelling.
And I would agree with you. Everything that we've talked about is the business case, right? And that's why I love it when people ask me this question, to be honest with you. I love it because everything that we've talked about all the way through here are items of the business case, right? But as long, you know, the business case has to be positive. It has to be positive outcomes. And that's why you need to focus on these positive outcomes. What is it going to do for you that's better than what you did before, right? And those are the things that should go into the business case, right? I no longer need a guy to watch my test and dev environment every single minute of the day. Even though it's not critical, we all know test and dev environments, those developers will be all over you if it goes down. It's just as critical as production, right? So I no longer need to worry about that. I don't need to worry about when they underestimated to me how many servers they need for this application, which happens all the time. It doesn't happen some of the time, it happens all the time. They say I need 3 servers, they really need 6, right? So you don't need to worry about stuff like this. These are all benefits.
Yeah, another thing that just reminded me is the pay-as-you-go model. Because let's say you did get that test and development environment built up in your environment. After you're done with that test and development, it sits there until you have another test and development or have need for that resource. Whereas in a cloud environment, you can decommission it and stop paying for it. We have that within Cloud, they have that within Verizon.
So thanks. That's all the questions that I have for the panel, but I did want to open it up for people in the audience to ask questions. We've been in cloud for a long time. I work with our product teams in cloud on a day-to-day basis. I work with partners, some of them that are in the room on a day-to-day basis. So any questions that any panel has? Yes.
Okay. I just had a question for the private cloud. Is there encryption in Pennsylvania?
There is for us in Calgary, yes.
So it's a great question. I don't know of a single customer that we have that doesn't have that requirement.
Can you repeat the question?
So the question is, encryption in motion and at rest, is that a functionality that's available in the private cloud, right? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely it is. There's many different ways that we can actually provide that. I think, our existing systems support that, but then there's also ways that we can make it so that you can manage those keys as well. And so there's lots of different ways that we can.
Especially for PHI, we require encryption, because some customers don't want encryption.
Well, and that's largely to protect us as well as it is to protect
Because
you.
we don't want to be able to access information, so we insist on encryption.
Our terms and conditions and provisions that we have asked that business partners follow requires data protection at all times, rest or return.
Any other questions? Yes.
As for Verizon, do you have any customers who are using your cloud just for disaster recovery?
Yes, actually, it's probably one of the most common use cases for cloud. It's one of the what I call on-ramps to cloud, right? Where there's a few things I think that you need to be very conscious of when you look at a vendor and you're evaluating vendors for that. I tend to think that agencies like fully featured DR scenarios where we actually help you through the process of actually putting together not only just the infrastructure, but the plan and everything else that goes around that, right? So we do have a lot of customers that do that, and we have full products that actually wrap around the DR cycle. It's very, very common for that.
Do you have terms and conditions with the state, or how would people engage with Verizon?
We do, yeah, absolutely. So we work very, very closely with the Office of Technology, and we've got some other contracts that we're a part of. So I know contracting vehicles and things like that are always an issue, but we're working directly with them on that. So there's lots of different avenues. Yep. Yes.
A question about cost and the size of private cloud. So California State has that's cost effectiveness. But if you have a cloud for each of the departments, that still be cost effectiveness. So was the decision that you have a cloud for California State because of the size and make it cost effective?
Well, so I think I'll go ahead and I'll hand it off to you. But so I think let me repeat the question. But I think there's a cloud for the state of California. Is one cloud or multiple clouds more cost effective, right? I guess that's the general question, right? I think they can both be cost effective. It's just what you need to do, you're trying to leverage, when you build a cloud, you're trying to leverage your cost for scale. And as long as you use, there's a lot of technologies for segregation that are out there. There's a lot of technologies to partition environments. And as long as you're using the same repeatable infrastructure to make those separate clouds, you can still leverage the benefit of that scale, right? As many people that can fit on the same infrastructure and that are willing to accept that, I think that's great. That's where you gain your tremendous benefits. But I still do think there is cost effectiveness in standardizing your implementation and repeating that, right? So I think you still can do separate instances and still be cost effective. Obviously, it's more effective if you can get everybody on the same infrastructure.
You hit it on the nail by the word of standardization.
Yeah.
One of the other business cases for cloud is that you will force a standardization.
Yeah.
It's been one of our challenges at the data center, that we have pretty much one of everything, because customers and departments implement solutions that we have to host. So cloud, what it will do, it will only provide support for certain platforms. So the chances of bringing yet another one-off becomes less. I thought your question was, should each department have its own cloud, or should we go to a consolidated cloud for the state?
That's part of the question.
Okay. Obviously, consolidation is going to make sense. And we have created a cloud for the whole state, and not just the state, but also local government. We have already started with a few entities within cities and counties who are coming and becoming part of CalCloud. So definitely consolidating them would reap more benefits than each department having its own cloud. But there is also a cloud policy in the state that encourages all departments to go to cloud first.
another follow-up question. Now, you have these department accountants at different locations. Do you have dedicated communication line, private communication line for each one of them?
Well, so we have,
Earlier you mentioned.
yeah, so we have the ability to accommodate that. Obviously, what we want to do is look at, what your connection strategy is and what makes the most sense, right? If we can, there's obviously a lot of rural areas that, are difficult to get to. I think being Verizon and being a communications company, we have a lot of options for that. But I think, we do have the ability to connect to a lot of the remote locations. And I think, OTEC has the ability to leverage a lot of, different vendors under that.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
There are connectivities. We have customers from all over the state of California connecting to us in our managed services, in our mainframe environment, or in our cloud. And it is through partnership and collaboration with entities like Verizon and 5 others who are part of our cabinet contract.
And understand, in our facilities, our larger facilities to support our private, like federal cloud, we have over 150 different network providers in the building. So it's not a question if you were coming to our cloud or another competitor's cloud, you're not forced into a Verizon connection. So if you're using AT&T or one of our other competitors, in most cases they're all connected in the facility. So you have a variety of options when we look at what you're doing as to how to do it.
The trend now is to actually make disparate communication vendors networks actually peer seamlessly, right? And everybody has an effort to do that. AT&T is doing that, you're doing that, we're doing that, everybody's peering that. And that's because if you can't get to the cloud, you can't use it, right? It has to be realistically connected and in a real way in order for that to happen, right? I know you raised your hand earlier,
Yeah, thank you. Does CalCloud expose an API or a service integration point for data center connection?
That's a good question because it gives me a chance to clarify what CalCloud is. CalCloud is really the umbrella of all state of California's cloud services, one of which is infrastructure as a service. We have email cloud service offering. We have customer management cloud offering. We have portfolio management, IT service management, all of those being offered. What you are asking is more in the application and interface with that, and more in the platform as a service environment. That's where it's going to come into play. We are looking into offering managed services within CalCloud, which would cover what you're talking about as well.
Thank you very much for attending the panel. It looks like we're out of time. And so,
I'd like to say one thing
Yeah,
before
sure.
everybody goes. If you're interested in coming to the Verizon Solutions Academy, which will be held June the 25th at the Sheraton Grand Hotel, just come to the booth and I'll sign you up and make sure that you get an official invite. It'll be covering a multitude of different technologies, of which cloud will also be included. So,
Thank you very much, and thank you for the panel members. Thank you very much.